Oh boy. Well, let's get Spotify working, y'all. Hi, by the way. Give me a few minutes getting things set up. Welcome to Fear and Loving this week. We're just going to wing it this week. Just got some things on my mind, got some things to read. I'm going to have Jake come in here and chat with me a little bit, guys. But yeah, I got a new Twitch page set up, Real Fear and Loving. Let's see if I can get the tunes that I want to play. Here we go. This is Victor Jara. I'll share you guys on him real quick in the chat. Let's see. My boy Ennis. Recommended this to me. We'll get started in a few minutes. Thanks, guys.
mi canto, como dijera Violeta, guitarra trabajadora, con olor a primavera. Que no es guitarra de rico, ni cosa que se parezca. Mi canto es de los andarios para alcanzar las estrellas. Que el canto tiene sentido cuando palpitan las venas del que morirá cantando las verdades verdaderas, no las lisonjas fugaces, ni las famas.
Feeling ready to chat. What is up, everybody? That was Victor Jara, Jara. I put a link to him in the chat. Just found out about him today. My buddy Ennis, one of my most politically active friends in my life in Boston, sent me this guy today. He's out there. Ennis was a big part of Bernie Sanders' campaign and is working, to keep continuing to keep fighting for the people out there. Someone asked me, John, what's up, John? He said, where are you? You near Ma? Well, aren't we always near Mother, you guys? No, I think he means Massachusetts, and the answer is I'm in Medford, coming at you, as my boys upstairs, Jimmy Trapella, who's going live soon, would say, live and direct from Massachusetts. We are in Medford. Medford is essentially Cambridge, right down the street. Thank you, Nicole. Shout out again. She likes the shout outs for the tunes. Yeah, we got the link for the artist up there in the chat right now. So I'm kind of just bringing some, improv energy to the show today. We're just going to kind of muse on WTF, America. What the fuck, America? It's, I saw this wild little meme that someone put together that's, just, let me see if I can pull it up for you guys. Let's see. Yeah, I think I can do it. So I'm, let's see. We can show you my Chrome. We're going to go ahead and do that. Let's see. Let's do the Chrome view. Boom. Transition. Okay. Yeah, you guys might have seen it. It was my little promo for the show today. But there it is. Oh, I can't spread a dangerous virus. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought this was America. Resonated with your boy Ranch here a lot, Yeah, it's just this image here that we're viewing. It's what I'm seeing out there in a lot of these videos, and it's just we're gonna be looking back on history, guys, and we're gonna see these videos that show, our fellow Americans all around this country that are, frustrated, concerned, afraid, not afraid, whatever it is, but they're out there, unmasked, just being defiant of rules or suggestions from scientists and our government and their state's governments, and just being out there in the streets. And it's one thing to protest right now. I am down with our freedom to protest, and I'm pro that. But for folks to be coughing in each other's faces, which I saw in one video, this guy's like, cough in my face, it's like, come on. And then somebody came up to him and coughed in his face, and it's been an issue, and it's scary. And on a personal level, it just seems like math, as I've been following along with the virus the whole time, it just has seemed like good math that and good science, and just makes rational sense that if we are, seeing during this period of, kind of the outbreak, and even if it is with a down, as we're kind of hitting a little bit of a downward slope with the curve here, thank God, for us to see that downward, for that curve to continue downwards when we crack open these states and just let America be America again, like right here in the beginning of May. It's a little crazy for me to think that we're not going to see a rise in cases and in turn a rise in deaths. And I personally haven't seen a lot of information from any sources, credible or not, news or not, whatever you want to call it, that make me feel confident that they've got a handle on treating it, for one, the coronavirus, but also, obviously we don't have any way for folks to avoid getting it. So yeah, we're gonna kind of get back to that in a little bit, and we're gonna have Jake come in here and give us a little bit of a history lesson, give us some info. Maybe we'll check out a video. Oh, looks like we have Jake. Jake's just gonna join us, guys. Yeah. And so
brought you some iced chai.
Iced chai to go with my coffee. We're getting
double fisted.
We're getting caffeinated, y'all.
Am I too early?
No. Give me just a second.
I might need a little more light on my face.
Yeah, let me see.
How about this blue light over here? How this one?
No, but I could. We can just spin her here.
We just need light, bro. No, guys don't work.
You think the blue light will work?
I don't know. Yeah, see, look, I'm the ghost of virus past.
Wow, Jake is here to.
Hello, Richard.
Give us some insight into a little of the history, but maybe I will take us into a little reading real quick here before we get into that, Jake, if you don't mind. So
no, that's fine. I like reading.
Yeah, so I was going to let's see how this looks on the stream here. I was going to jump into an essay that I wrote in 2009, just kind of read it to you guys, and maybe Jake, we can chat about it a little bit. But it is called Years of the Yuppie, the Personal Consumer. So I don't know if you guys know what a yuppie is. It's essentially
a young urban professional.
Yeah.
I think, was it coined by Wolf?
I think that it was. I think we were in the same history class this year.
And that's Wolf with an E, everybody.
Jake and I went to school together at Boston University, and tried to keep each other awake during U.S. history class.
One of my favorites.
But
65, right?
Yeah. Oh, we got Hawk in the chat, Jake.
What up, Hawk?
Hawk, what's up? We got a neighbor here, Dusty Hawk, over there. And he believes China had it handled long ago, and look at the numbers. And, man, I'm trying to look at those numbers, Hawk. There are a lot of numbers coming from a lot of places, and I only trust the numbers that come out of Donald J. Trump's mouth myself. So if he didn't tell it to us, not right? Jake's brain just blew up a little bit. He's like, no, don't say that. Don't joke like that.
History right now, and how we know what we know is in jeopardy.
Right. Well, we're gonna jump into this. So I have not thought about this essay in a while, but I thought maybe we could take something away from it, or at least kind of feel like maybe we know where some of this has come from. And I don't mean the denial of the virus or anything like that, or its immediacy. This is more about our consumerism. Years of the Yuppie, the Personal Consumer. The election of Ronald Reagan as President of the United States in 1980 resulted in a comprehensive shift in American values and lifestyle. During his 2 terms in office, the Reagan Revolution marked society's rejection of 60s counterculture, activism, and liberalism. Reagan's Greed is Good initiative encouraged Americans to indulge in their own livelihood, prosperity, and material gains. Wall Street became the generator of an advantageous new American economy, while personal consumption and spending proved to be a rewarding means for the American individual to feel as though they held a stake in both their own lives as well as the state of the nation. For the first time in their lifetime, a younger generation of Americans felt an encouraging feeling that things were looking up in the 1980s. The introduction of the American young urban professional, commonly known as the yuppie, into society created a new breed of American. The 80s proved to be not only the Reagan decade, but also the decade of the yuppie. Jay McInerney's 1984 novel, Bright Lights, Big City. Awesome novel, great movie too. Really interesting depiction of that time. A lot of cocaine in that. Depicts the plight of the yuppie from within the garish metropolis of Manhattan. The rise of the yuppie produced a new understanding of what it meant to uphold and strengthen one's personal identity in society, what it meant to be a consumer in America. The yuppies embodied an American cultural phenomenon, the me generation. Many baby boomers who participated and experienced the ascension of an idealistic and communal 60s countercultural found themselves faced with the harsh reality of their own independent well-being by the 1980s. Sounds familiar. These people chilled out during the 70s, compromised, dropped much of their social commitment, and began to become a yuppie. Yuppiedom did not simply occur by means of some external factor. Instead, it transpired through a heightened sense of self-indulgence in their personal lives. Unlike the man in the gray flannel suit and the nuclear families of the 1950s, the yuppies adopted a new system of middle-class living that was not centered on the family and the home. They have rejected the suburban values of their parents in favor of living where the action is. The central character in McInerney's novel lives the standard 80s New York City yuppie lifestyle marked by luxurious tastes and desires and a promising profession.
I think of American Psycho.
Right, similar stuff, yeah, absolutely. His yuppiness is a direct product of his migration from the Midwest to the city. As quoted in the novel, you begin to feel that you were no longer on the outside looking in. When you were growing up, you suspected that everyone else had been let in on some fundamental secret which was kept from you. The baby boomers and yuppies no longer felt a need to exist within the margins of society. Now they could focus on decisions in regards to their own life's direction. For many people, being a yuppie meant turning their aspirations inward. Much of the energy and optimism and passion of the 60s seems to have been turned inward on lives, careers, apartments, and dinners. As hardworking Americans, the yuppies believed that they owed it to themselves to amass a wealth and constantly satiate their personal desires. Constantly aspiring for more of oneself and never being satisfied. Your presence here is only a matter of conducting an experiment in limits, reminding yourself of what you aren't, as the character in the novel said. For most yuppies, every decision, every move became inherently calculated in a selfish way. Their ideas and work became for the self. They no longer focused their interests on society, those people close to them, or some struggling, oppressed whole. By rejecting their aged hippie political ideologies, the yuppies converted our thing into my thing. This shift in concentration of the yuppies' concern can be seen in how the protagonist of Bright Lights, Big City reacts when an old woman is accosted on the train by another man. You would like to see if she's all right, but at this point it wouldn't do much good. You sit down. Focusing their attention on their material lives and the prospect of an upward mobility, the yuppies popularized an apathetic American mood. What yuppies have discovered is nothing less than a new plane of consciousness, a state of transcendental acquisition, in which the perfection of their possessions enables them to rise above the messy turmoil of their emotional lives. Perhaps the most lasting impact that the yuppies had on American society can be found in the economics of the Reagan decade. Paired with Reagan's supply-side economics, tax cuts, and limits upon the federal government, the yuppies' devotion to new ideals of consumption drastically changed American economics. The yuppie bind of having to work hard to afford the kind of luxuries that make hard work possible. The yuppies wanted more and more out of their material lives, so they frivolously worked the most profitable jobs they could attain. As they made more money, they spent more money, becoming trapped in a cycle of BMW car payments and penthouse leases. A man's home, after all, is his castle. From the book again. For McInerney's main character, the concept of a home exceeded traditional modest ideas. Yuppies saw their homes, their cars, their clothes as a means to show the world how perfect, clean, and attractive their life was. Yuppies like to think of themselves as having an ability to perform deftly, technological sophistication, elegant looks. As their level of spending increased, the yuppies' new age consumption became a model in which the corporate market had to adhere. Yuppies are challenging the ossified corporate structures just as they once challenged the sacred traditions of academia, and forcing them into more imaginative solutions. An entirely new popular area of consumption emerged, that of the private sector. Even those who don't meet all the statistical criteria may find their lives and spending habits to a large degree falling into patterns set by the yuppies. By 1984, trickling down of the privatization of everyday life became commonplace amongst business and society alike, with the private sphere being seen as a better alternative to the public sector. The average American consumer suddenly had extra cash to spend on a steak dinner or a blouse from Bloomingdale's. You had rent covered. You had your favorite restaurant on McDowell, where the waitress knew your names and you could bring your own bottle of wine. The yuppies' new model of consumption provided Americans in the 80s with the belief that anyone could get rich or at least live rich. The impact of the yuppie upon the future of the American economy did not limit itself strictly to the role of the consumer. Yuppies that made enough to have extra money left over after satisfying their need to spend often looked for new opportunities to make money. The Reagan decade embodied the rise of the small investor. In playing the stock market, the yuppies discovered a means in which they could gain some influence over the economy itself. They make money from money, manipulate markets for their own profit, and provide highly skilled and rewarded services, service central to a capitalist economy. Additionally, the 80s became the period in which the popular American entrepreneurs surfaced. More and more Americans use their affluence to fill their pockets with new money from new personal businesses. They all have enterprises on the side, typically a little something in real estate. To wrap it up, in the late 80s, the American yuppie saw its popularity slide, becoming an object of scorn, their reputation ruined by an obvious increase in immoral business decisions made by well-known yuppies. However, the yuppie ideal lived on. The impact of yuppiedom on American society fueled a period of expansive economic growth that, until very recently, led the nation into a prosperous, enchanting couple of decades. Even amidst our current economic malaise, this was written in 2009, at the beginning, the height of the recession, Americans still embodied the yuppie essence. Americans today continue to strive for the best possible way to live their lives, placing a special importance on efficiency. One would be hard-pressed to find Americans within today's society who does not value their own well-being in one or more manners introduced by the yuppies. Yeah, it feels like just some commonplace stuff. A lot of these ideals that were mentioned in this essay. Just the consumerism ideals that America post-yuppie, post-80s. It's just like, of course, that's what we do and how we think and what we do together and what we're striving for. But it wasn't that way really until this time in the 80s.
Yeah, I think a combination of, like they were saying, technology, politics kind of coming to a head. People wanted to, say, live a little bit more and not settle down so soon. What do you think about that? Hey, let's have a full young adult life through our 20s, and maybe we'll start a family in our 30s. Maybe we won't.
Sure, and it did make a lot of sense as to why that road came to be and why it was popular. And
isn't that appealing to us?
What's that?
Isn't that appealing to guys like us?
Sure. And to an extent, but we can feel the reverberations of that shift and how that affected the way business was done, and then the way markets were shifting. But then in that way, the way politics were done in terms of those markets, and then in turn, the way politics has essentially become so focused on market and these ideals that the individual Chase has, that we are not, our systems and our government don't have as much energy or attention to give to the whole and the struggles of the people that are maybe most at risk.
I'd say too, like the idea of what was before the yuppie was dominating the sort of social landscape of American cities. It was the families, the working businessman, the guy in the tweed suit, right? And that's a market. That's a way to make money. The family needs certain things that businesses can help to, and that's a way to keep the economy going. But now here emerges this new social trend that's also a moneymaker. These young people that have extra cash to blow on cool stuff, and sort of feeding that led to, it just became a vicious cycle, you could say, right?
True.
Good stuff.
Okay.
So that's the 80s.
So,
right.
I'm gonna take us into just a quick clip that everybody's pushing around the past couple days, really just since yesterday, of Fauci kind of giving his take on the economy reopening. So let's.
If we push to reopen too soon, but the president has actually been sending the opposite message. I want to ask you today, what message you have for communities and states that are reopening, even as our public health experts make it clear it's too soon? Tell us what the consequences are.
Thank you very much for that question, Senator Murray. As I've said many times publicly, what we have worked out is a guideline framework of how to safely open America again. And there are several checkpoints in that, with a gateway first of showing, depending on the dynamics of an outbreak in a particular region, state, city, or area, that would really determine the speed and the pace with which one does re-enter or reopen. So my word has been, and I've been very consistent in this, that I get concerned if you have a situation where the dynamics of an outbreak in an area are such that you are not seeing that gradual over 14-day decrease that would allow you to go to phase 1. And then if you pass the checkpoints of phase 1, go to phase 2 and phase 3. What I've expressed then and again is my concern that if some areas, cities, states, or what have you, jump over those various checkpoints and prematurely open up without having the capability of being able to respond effectively and efficiently, my concern is that we will start to see little spikes that might turn into outbreaks. So therefore, I have been being very clear in my message to try to the best extent possible to go by the guidelines which have been very well thought out and very well delineated.
So if a community or a state or a region doesn't go by those guidelines and reopen, the consequences could be pretty dire, correct?
The consequences could be really serious, particularly, and this is something that I think we also should pay attention to, that states, even if they're doing it at an appropriate pace, which many of them are and will, namely a pace that's commensurate with the dynamics of the outbreak, that they have in place already the capability that when there will be cases, there is no doubt, even under the best of circumstances, when you pull back on mitigation, you will see some cases appear. It's the ability and the capability of responding to those cases with good identification, isolation, and contact tracing will determine whether you can continue to go forward as you try to reopen America. So it's not only doing it at the appropriate time with the appropriate constraints, but having in place the capability of responding when the inevitable return of infections occur.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, y'all. You know, I assume us bringing any. Whoa, let's get this. Whoa. CNN with the commercials. Oh my God. So you know, I am conscious of saying the word CNN and having Dr. Fauci's voice on this episode here may just cause some people to freak out overall, and we're just gonna have to be cool with that. You know, I think whether or not you think that Dr. Fauci and his cronies and the government has cooked up this whole concept, you know, we're not gonna go there with it, I don't think, but it does make sense. I think in my mind, where I'm just using my powers of rational thinking here, it makes sense that there is such an opportunity for outbreaks with this brand new virus that nobody knew about a few weeks ago and clearly is a thing. It's real. It's affected everybody.
Well, what do you mean didn't know about a few weeks ago? We've known about it.
By weeks, I mean months.
And that you mean the majority of people?
I just mean the world didn't really know a thing about it until...
The world definitely did know.
I mean, I suppose...
We've been studying coronaviruses
but
for a
this
long time.
specific virus wasn't really known until December, I think.
It's
right?
the new mutation.
Right.
And a little basic understanding of viruses is that they mutate on a pretty regular schedule. We see it happen yearly with the flu, for example. And I don't know if this is a good time, but you know, with the smallpox not vaccine outbreak, which occurred for centuries, it occurred on a regular routine of every about 12 years, at least we saw in colonial America. So these viruses come and go, and they mutate and they come back and they're different. So yeah, we didn't know about this one until, you're right, this year in 2019.
Right. So in not knowing about it until very recently, and then obviously our government in particular, but so many governments didn't really take it all that seriously until just a few weeks ago, until there were massive outbreaks and outbreaks all over the world and all over our country. And yes, we've seen through these changes, these social distancing, this shutting down of the country to such an extent. We have seen outbreaks slow down. We have seen these numbers drop. I mean, it's happening, thankfully. But to believe that outbreaks in other parts of the country that maybe haven't seen an outbreak yet, or an outbreak happening again in a city of millions of people, to think that that is impossible and can't happen is just absurd, I think. And so if outbreaks are possible still, and we could see outbreaks leading to more deaths, as well as who knows what, apparently having COVID-19 it's not guaranteed. We don't definitely know how that affects an individual, and it seems to probably affect individuals different
And
ways.
it's not just the lungs they're finding out either. It depends on the individual.
I've seen some weird stuff, like it affects people's feet. I don't know. It's just it's affecting like all kinds of elements of people's bodies. So, and in long term, obviously, we have no idea what it's going to do. So, do we want outbreaks? Do we want to see a whole bunch more of this like blow up? Obviously not. Just in terms of deaths, we don't want to see more people get sick that are at risk. So, we need to think a little bit about not letting outbreaks happen. Considering he also has alluded to, and knowing, being the person that this country has put in charge of monitoring the situation, he, in that video from today, and just generally his attitude has been, but they silence him. The government and Trump they don't let him speak to the Congress. Like, he's currently not allowed to speak to the House about this, which is, I find to be telling. But what he would say, and what he is saying, is that he does not believe that much of this country, much of our hospitals or our systems are ready for to really take care of this still. We still don't really have the best practices in place in our healthcare to handle it. So if we're talking more outbreaks, if we're talking more people getting it, doesn't sound great. I mean, it sounds like shit across the board. And then I mentioned today that Germany is looking at their numbers go up in a way that's making the country reconsider locking down potentially even harder.
Sweden too.
And so, and like somewhere like Italy, I mean, their lockdown was like really intense. Like in America or in the U.S., the lockdown wasn't nearly as rough as that, I don't think. So we could see a much more oppressive lockdown, which I know nobody likes the sound of that. And we could just see us going back to lockdown after this. And that just sounds like shit, considering how whack it was the first time around. But
Yeah.
something about the second time around sounds really rough.
What's the alternative, right? And I think Governor Cuomo said, what is the price of a human life, right? And something like when talking about this, and there, it's priceless. There is no, economic sort of gauge here that we can compare to lives, right? So the economy is going to suffer, and that doesn't mean
Right.
that people need to die for that. That's not like dying for a cause, going to war, and these controversies about individual freedoms and expressions when it comes to the overall sort of welfare of society. It's a tough one, but it's also not a new one, and we've seen it come up in our history before.
I mean, I just think that there are rational voices, there are rational thought processes that are also compassionate and like just sane, that involve people believing that we should be opening back up, we should be letting people get back to work, we should be doing our best in that context to stay healthy and to not spread a virus. But then there's a whole slew of other people that have that come from a lot more of an angry and conspiracy focused position around, oh, it was cooked up this way, or we've known about it all along, or we're dealing with this so that they can do this and they can manipulate us. And I'm not going to take anything off the table, but I'm also not going to jump into those conspiracies
Well, it's
without
all very controversial.
right. And those people though are the ones that we're seeing in the streets with no masks or whatever, and if anything, inviting the virus into their life and into their friends' lives and into their communities' lives in the name of we want to see the economy open back up because we think it's more destructive to keep it closed. Or maybe they believe, some other people, the good people, think that we need to be expediting in this country, we need to get more cases of it as soon as possible.
So that's
The science says maybe
Yeah.
that's a good idea.
And that's something that we've looked at. We compared this disease to the Spanish influenza of the early 20th century a lot. And we did see examples of when Philadelphia, they didn't shut down, they had a parade. Lots of people died. I want to say it was something like 5 times to 10 times more people died than other cities. Like St. Louis at the time, they did shut down. And they had a longer sort of period of this quarantine or social distancing. It lasted for over a year or two. I'm getting my numbers from Netflix has a special, it's called Explained, and they do a really good job of explaining COVID-19. So that's a good example of how there's historical examples of how if we do expose this virus to the herd, that the herd immunity is what they call it, is something that kicks in. But the price of that is a lot of deaths. So would you rather have this sort of slow, long burn over a year or two of gradual opening and closing, which is really tough psychologically, or would you rather have just sort of a purge? And it really shows people sort of like sociopathic tendencies, when these sort of controversial,
I think it's one thing to be like, my opinion is that we open it all up and we don't close it again and we let the people that are going to get it perish and, c'est la vie. Like, if that was, like, your tone and, like, your presentation of that argument and you had some, like, it's a hard argument to make and you had some, like, some rationale behind it, that'd be one thing. But I'm hearing a lot of voices from that camp that are like, fuck it. Like, fuck it, fuck them, whoever they are that is gonna get it.
Well, so where's that coming from?
In
our terms of our ethos as Americans, right? Like we hold dear our individualism, right? And that's what we were getting into with this idea of the yuppie
and the consumerism,
the rise of the yuppies. That sort of ideal isn't new. The way it manifested in the young urban professionals of the 80s was something that was new, that technology, politics sort of gave rise to as well. But that ideal of individualism and self-expression and doing what's right for, say, you or your family, that was born out of the revolution. So I think this is a good time to talk about the other virus that a lot of people are not comparing. Well, some people are, but sort of in a more drastic ways. The smallpox virus.
Yeah, we're gonna go ahead and run this. We got a 3-minute video here for you guys that we found that we've been thinking about the context of this virus in terms of smallpox in some ways, but specifically this is about how it affected the U.S. right?
So let me give a little background. So this is an author. His name is Stephen Koss. He wrote a book called is it The Fever of 1721? Something like that?
1712.
1721, actually. Yeah.
21?
Yeah.
21.
And so he talks about how in early colonial America, and I'll let him do some of the talking, but pretty much that this idea of controversy and sort of politics and individual rights, it came up during the smallpox, the early colonial outbreaks of smallpox, and when they started figuring out in Boston actually that you could make an incision and do this sort of inoculation, a lot of people went crazy over that, and they started newspapers and they started all sorts of movements around sort of the idea of you don't get to tell me what to do with my body. And he doesn't get into the religious movement that eventually came out of it that we still see here in Boston, which is the Church of Christian Science. That was born about 100 years after what the period he's talking. But yeah, let's just watch the video.
Okay,
And,
all right, let's do it, guys. I think we're ready to go. Let's see.
about every 12 years. But by early 1721, the town was 6 years overdue. That meant there were many more people, young children especially, for the disease to prey upon. Everyone feared that when smallpox finally returned, its devastation would be unprecedented. And they were right. In the decades following the 1692 Salem witch trials, Boston minister Cotton Mather put aside many of his superstitious beliefs and embraced Enlightenment science. In 1716, he came across an exotic procedure that was said to produce lifelong immunity to smallpox. When the 1721 outbreak spiraled out of control, Mather urged Boston's physicians to try the procedure. Only one doctor agreed. On June 26, 1721, Zabdiel Boylston began the Boston inoculation experiment. That day marked the beginning of the end of smallpox. Boylston's inoculation experiment caused an uproar. Many people believed that making an incision in the arm of a healthy person and implanting it with pus from the sores of a smallpox patient was madness. An enterprising young printer named James Franklin seized upon the outrage to start a newspaper. His New England Courant mocked and criticized both the government and the clergy. When he was thrown in jail for seditious libel, his apprentice took over. That young man's name was Benjamin Franklin. The printing house offered Ben the books he needed for his fabled self-education. It was also where James's ingenious friends gathered to discuss and debate books, pamphlets, and radical ideas. Ben soaked it all in. His front row seat for the inoculation controversy crystallized his thinking about medicine, politics, diplomacy, and freedom of expression. It also inspired him to pen his first essays as Silence Do-Good. Smallpox and James Franklin weren't Boston's only problems. For several years, a hard-drinking politician named Elisha Cook had been battling the Massachusetts royal governor for control of the colony. By 1721, Cook's political organization, the Boston Caucus, was powerful enough to obstruct nearly every policy dictated by Governor Samuel Shute and the Crown. England threatened to revoke the colony's charter and place it under martial law, and Cook was accused of plotting to assert the independency of New England. Several decades later, his caucus, now under the leadership of Samuel Adams, would indeed launch the American Revolution.
What do we think, Jake?
Good stuff. Yeah, I mean, pretty much what we're talking about right now is a life or death situation giving rise to political controversy, right? So it's something that the whole society is dealing with together. They've been dealing with it. Now they're coming to sort of this tipping point where they know it's coming again and they want to do something about it before they're losing their babies. And, there's more babies to lose, right? Because there's more families that are making babies because the smallpox hadn't come yet. So, and this is a guy, Cotton Mather, they talk about how the decades after the Salem witch trials, and these people were superstitious. They were not scientific. Typically, you had your individuals that were doing the good work of enlightenment, but in general, the masses of people didn't understand this stuff. And actually, it's important to understand that the vaccination for smallpox wouldn't come till more than almost a century and a half later. So the discoveries that they made in the early 1700s were so controversial because actually a lot of people did die when they would give them the inoculation, not the vaccination. Even with the vaccination, at first 1% to 2% people still died, even though they considered it a cure. So, this idea of controversy arising from an epidemic, and giving rise to this idea of what the individual sees best fit for themselves, and not based on anything that, say, science or Maybe even religion would tell them, depending on what side of the controversy you're on. So, and as you can see from what the author here was talking about in his book, is that political controversy around this medical controversy set the stage, gave people ideas that eventually led to this radical revolution that is now our country. And so at the founding of our country here in America, which a lot of people you can see on television every day are super proud of, is this idea of, I don't care if everyone's dying around me, I'm going to still have my individual rights as a person to make my decisions. And that's what makes us American. And so that's true. As you can't deny that is part of our ethos as a people in a country. At least, you could say that the majority of people who identify as proudly American would say that probably that is up in the most, upheld sort of in their list of priorities when it comes to the Constitution.
Sure. Well, I suppose we're at this point where it's just like we're all just going to have to see. It's going to be. A lot of people have made their decision in believing that the right thing for them and their families, and I suppose their community and the country and just people in general in the world, is to allow them to get back at it and to not really think about what it is they're doing while they're out there either, so that they can really just I suppose hope that they're going to be good and everybody else is going to be good. I still just really don't quite. I get where they're coming from and not wanting their state and their government to tell them what to do,
right,
or to keep them from going to work, or to keep them from going to a restaurant or whatever it is. I understand that sentiment, and like if we give them that and we acknowledge that at what in their, maybe we agree with them. Do they take it even further, and essentially it's like they don't believe that the virus can be caught and that they can give it to people and that you could die from it and that their friends could die from it? Like, is it even that far? And I think for some people, maybe it is, because at this point, like, we're gonna see, because now we're gonna reopen. I mean, I think even this state's gonna reopen, and it's summer. We're gonna see a lot of people doing a lot of hanging. I'm already seeing it. A lot of party people on Instagram going, spending time together.
And believe us, guys, we
wish
we were there with you.
You're looking at a couple guys that that would love to be mingling and partying, but we haven't really left.
I will say, it's, in terms of, I see people trying to compare this to other things that they've experienced in their own lives. What makes us a special species, I think, is that we have the ability to look not only ahead, but also in the past. We've recorded this stuff. We have history that is pretty much truth, guys. Like, there's facts from, I know a lot of people don't trust their history books a lot, but there are facts you can pull from these stories of the past. And I think it's important to, not look at what it was like when the HIV epidemic broke out. It's not the same thing. I heard a doctor talking about how, they didn't, not let HIV people or anyone with their HIV medicine into the pharmacies. That, we're not even allowed in the pharmacies if we have symptoms. And it's like, dude, you can't catch HIV just walking into a pharmacy, okay? It's that simple. But people are like just not looking back into the history books enough, to these stories that are really sort of telling and help us understand also the other side of the argument. Because we've been having these arguments, not in the same way, but similarly,
right,
for centuries.
And I'm gonna just go straight up and I'm gonna say this. It's something I've been thinking, and they're also not able to read a piece of news, something written by a journalist that is observing our history, our reality today, putting it, taking all the data and the research and just they're doing their best to take in truth and put it on paper the way that they were taught, like myself. If we can't believe in so many of these people that we're talking about that are denying history or choosing to not know history, or also denying a piece by a journalist and at a source that is reputable. And one source in particular is just it is sure it has essentially picked a fight with Donald Trump and picked a fight with Mitch McConnell and like picked a fight with some leaders of the right. So then it's been dubbed a far left type of journalistic outlet. But the pieces that I've read consistently throughout my life on the New York Times, in the New York Times newspaper, sure, they tend to allow all kinds of opinion pieces, but definitely left-leaning opinion pieces maybe find more of a space on their website. So maybe that's why it's more of a liberal or leftist rag. But, the pieces are written at the highest level of journalism by journalists that have spent their lives being objective and showing truth. So I figure I would just show off a little bit of this one from today. The New York Times by Donald McNeil Jr. As states rush to reopen, scientists fear a coronavirus comeback. Officials are under pressure to restart the economy, but many states are moving too quickly, researchers say. The cost may be measured in lost lives. Millions of working people and small business owners who cannot earn money while sheltering at home are facing economic ruin. So dozens of states seeking to ease the pain are coming out of lockdown. Most have not met even minimal criteria for doing so safely, and some are reopening even as coronavirus cases rise, inviting disaster. The much-feared second wave of infection may not wait until fall, many scientists say, and instead may become a storm of wavelets breaking unpredictably across the country. The reopenings will proceed nonetheless. The question now, scientists say, is whether the nation can minimize the damage by intelligently adopting new tactics. Evidence is mounting that masks, if worn in public places by everyone, are far more effective at stopping transmission than was previously realized. Across the nation, testing remains wholly inadequate, but home-use nasal swabs and saliva tests are on the way that may provide a clearer picture of what the virus is. Americans are lining up for antibody tests that may reveal who has some immunity, perhaps opening paths back to normal life for them. Early but still controversial surveys suggest that more Americans may carry antibodies than initially thought. Employers are moving to design safer workplaces. A modestly effective antiviral treatment has been found, and laboratories around the world are racing towards the grail, a vaccine, at an unprecedented pace. But while it may still be possible to blunt the impact of the reopenings, the nation is finding even this goal difficult. As the weather warms, Americans are already struggling to stay at home or remain 6 feet apart on crowded beaches, hiking trails, and park playgrounds. Every crowd may have some silent carriers of the virus. Don't forget, guys, this is real. Outside New York, California, and a few other states, many Americans refuse to wear masks, and governors and mayors have waffled over whether to order them to. The dispute has even led to threats and a killing. I'm surprised only one. That's a blessing. 50 brands of antibody tests are available, but many are inaccurate. Many states are moving too quickly for employers and retailers to make environments safe, and the lockdowns have become entwined in partisan politics, with some libertarian extremists, gun rights advocates, and anti-vaccine activists painting them as an infringement of personal freedoms. Deaths are already far higher than the 60,000 once predicted by August. Even President Trump has begun to talk of a toll that may reach 100,000, perhaps more.
Are we there already?
We're not at 100,000 deaths yet. Okay. We're at like 85,000 or something like that.
That's good.
Some epidemiological models predict 3 times that, many within months. Closer to 240,000 that the White House's coronavirus task force predicted in March, before switching to a new, more optimistic model. Dr. Anthony Fauci, the task force chief medical advisor, has said he expects cases to spike in closed environments like nursing homes, prisons, and factories, and we are seeing a lot of nursing homes, prisons, and factories in the news with massive outbreaks and lots of deaths. I mean, it's happening
right down the street,
the street from us here in Medford, Massachusetts. In walking distance, a assisted living facility. I mean, the amount of people in that facility that died versus the amount of people that were
over 50.
I think it's over 50%.
Over 50%.
Over 50%.
Which was like over 50.
Which
people.
was definitely over 50 people. Yeah, and I haven't checked back in on that, but so we're not reopening based on science, says Dr. Thomas Frieden, a former director of the CDC in the Obama administration. We're reopening based on politics, ideology, and public pressure. I think it's going to end badly. That sentence is something I could have wrote. That's definitely where my head's at. It's like, okay, well, it's clear why we're doing this. All quiet at first. The effects of the reopenings will not be immediately apparent And in the absence of widespread testing, it'll be hard to know where the country stands in the fight against the virus. It takes 2 or 3 weeks for the newly infected who become severely ill to need hospitalization. An initial calm may encourage more Americans to drop their guard or more governors to ease restrictions. It's happening. I'm feeling the calm. Feeling more calm. I'm thinking maybe I can go out there. And I'm feeling it, and I'm on top of it, you know, whereas so many people that are like, hate this are feeling the calm, and they don't give a damn. They are out there, you know, spreading this to all the farm animals that they like to have sex with. I do worry that people will stay home enough in the states that open earliest so that we don't immediately see the second wave, and then other states will draw the wrong lessons, said Dr. Liana Wynn, a former health commissioner of Baltimore. Social distancing has proved effective at interrupting viral transmission in places where it was embraced. But now even formerly terrified New Yorkers living at the center of the nation's outbreak are clearly wearying of it. Central Park was so quiet in late March that the birdsong was startlingly loud, is often crowded with joggers, strollers, and cyclists. Avenues that were ghostly canyons now have far more cars. Mayor Bill de Blasio has complained, and steady traffic has returned to some local highways. Viruses persist only because they can exploit human interactions. A stray cough, a plume of virins made behind a jogger, a bicycle handle no one has disinfected. Nationwide, there are still about 25,000 new confirmed cases a day. COVID-19, the disease caused by the coronavirus. Most are probably within families, experts said, or among health workers and emergency personnel exposed on the job. But there have also been hotspots of hundreds of cases in meat and poultry plants, veterans hospitals, and nursing homes in rural states. To keep the toll from rising, some factories making essential goods like ventilators have placed workstations 6 feet apart and made temperature checks and masks mandatory. Food plants are installing plastic barriers between workers on cafeteria tables, requiring masks, checking symptoms at entrances, and doing more cleaning. Most nursing homes no longer accept visitors. As well-intentioned as these stopgap measures may be, they are part of a headlong rush back to normal life that few experts condone. Many models for safely reopening the economy have been issued, including one from the National Center for Direct Disaster Preparedness at Columbia and others from Harvard, COVID Act Now, and Resolve to Save Lives. Most reopening criteria, including the White House relatively vague guidelines, say that at a minimum, a state should have 14 days of declining cases before it even considers reopening. Almost no state reopening now has met that low standard. Right. They're just like, fuck it, like, we do not care. These states that are reopening, and you people in states where it is reopening, your state does not care what our government, which has a task force that has been on top of this as they can be, considering just how late to the game we were with our president. And our president's put these people into place, and we know he ain't a fan of this situation, and they're saying don't reopen unless, and yet states are doing it anyways. I mean, I guess that's the beauty of our democracy. You know, states do have that autonomy, I guess. Virtually all guidelines emphasize comprehensive testing and systematic contact tracing. Testing is a sore point. Virtually everyone but Mr. Trump says there are too few tests, but everyone disagrees about how many are needed. At a minimum, a state must do enough random testing, including among people with no symptoms, to detect a surge of cases anywhere within its borders. Otherwise, the first unmistakable sign that something is wrong will be the wail of sirens as oxygen-starved patients are taken to a local emergency room. By then, it may be too late to stop a flood of patients over the next week that will overwhelm that hospital. In rural America, even in relatively wealthy states like Texas, financially struggling hospitals often have few ventilators and ambulances must drive long distances. Oh boy, we could leave it there.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think there's some.
This is serious, though.
There's
I mean,
some dark things here. I think it's good to also look at history and the current events, and then look forward to the future and see how we can see the path out too. And I do see the path out. Unfortunately, it's going to take more stuff like this, teaching people, having conversations with your friends, showing them information you've learned about in a way that is, going to render the results that we all want. So, my final thought is, let's switch out the controversy with love, and try to love each other even though we don't agree, and keep that at the forethought of how we move through this, because we're going to get more done and render better results with more love. and less
Okay.
fear.
Okay. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, we're gonna see what happens. I'm gonna end our segment with a poem that I pulled up from an old blog.
And we're gonna go get ready for my DJ set.
Oh snap!
Anybody
us about-
watching?
Tell us about it. Tell us about it.
At 9 p.m., go to Facebook, Music Ecology. Our old school friends who pulled me into Wonder Bar. Love those guys. Shout out to Alex Russo and Paulina and Jeremy
Big ups.
and the whole crew. So
Yeah, music ecology, big staple in the Boston scene in terms of bringing electronic music and electronic producers into the Northeast and into Boston. And we kind of grew up there in some ways. So tonight they're doing a live stream at their Facebook page, and Jake will be on at 9 p.m.
9 o'clock.
9 p.m. very soon, less than
2
an hour.
hours.
I got to go get him set up.
Woo!
Yeah, so we'll
you
see you,
guys.
Jake. Thanks
All right.
for participating.
Good job, buddy.
Oh yeah. Okay, so hello everybody that's still out there. We are gonna do my poem. We want to wonder why. All right. So here we go. I wrote this in college. We want to wonder why. Well, we want to wonder why. Why lights burn out in mines and in the sky. Why some of our love pours and some runs dry. Why success or failure outweighs the try. Why some dames eat orchids and some men crave guys. Why we follow socialists, capitalists, and bear, oh my. Why pot remains criminal but poison tobacco is a legal buy. Why financial giants, populist despots, and dick love to watch their comrades die. And it's harder to be authentic than it is to be sly. Why it takes years of good men to slow down a government's lies. Why greed and fear toss ice caps into furnaces to fry. Why it's the too huge world vaulting us and it's goodbye. Why bright lights, glowing sticks, and large breasts catch our spinning eyes. Why they broke their backs lifting Moloch to heaven on high. Why some human beings don't have 20 dozen reasons to want to survive. Why pharmacies can cure and cause us to cry. Why all therapy isn't musical, vibrant, and live. Oh yeah, a lot of that still sums me up. You guys wondering, who wrote this thing? It's me. And yeah, can't we all just get along? Hawk, thanks for being here today. We'll love to get you involved. Maybe we'll have you on the show at some point. But yeah, next week, everybody, let me go ahead and clean up our OBS here. What should we show you? We'll do the big one. Boom. Okay, so next week we got an awesome Fear and Loving lined up. We're gonna have my good friend Gregory Funcello. Truth Now is his name. You can look that up. He's a spoken word poet, hip hop artist. Wrote an awesome poem that I'm going to try to drop in the chat here in a minute called Fox and Raccoon. Kind of a satirical piece about everything that we're going through right now and just, what it's like to be alive today in this country. And it really moved me. So we're going to have him read that with me over Zoom. And we're going to maybe I'll read the poem as well. And then I'm going to present a new poem. And I'm gonna read that to him and have him maybe read my poem. We're just gonna kind of see what it's like to read each other's poetry, and it's gonna be a lot of fun. So super excited about next week. Won't be as like kind of willy nilly as this week was, but it was great talking with Jake. And feel free to please follow me on Twitch. So my Twitch channel, I just changed the name. It's up there at the top. It's Real Fear and Loving. So twitch.tv/Real Fear and Loving. Go ahead and follow that, and I eventually I'll be transitioning a lot of these episodes into there and just pushing people to watch me on my Twitch. It's just generally a better idea if you are somebody out there who's doing content, putting together streams, DJ sets, whatever it is, podcast. And you are, thinking in terms of building your network and thinking in terms of building your following and putting that out there. You do want to do your best to kind of potentially doing it on a Twitch channel and building those numbers up and whatnot might be a better bet than here on Facebook. But let's see. We'll finish it out with a couple tracks here. So this is a new one from the Gorillas with Tony Allen and Skepta. Thanks a lot, guys. Love ya.
Time to hustle for the money, give a change to your mother. Change them sheets, you got stains on the cover. Better look sharp, like your face on the cover. Like a chameleon, see you change in your color. Crabs in the barrel wanna hate on each other, so my life gets better. Whatever the weather, I dance in the rain and I bathe in the summer. It's the black Coleon in a button-up shirt. Before we take off, you better buckle up first. Fresher than the president, psychedelics got me in my element. All negativity, that's irrelevant. Unbelief or ganja leave, I backstrap when I wrap the sheets. Now I feel to go for a drive, so I grab my keys. Shades on, roof down, trying to catch a breeze. Riding around the hood, got
As
the
you're
devil
sitting
in
in
my
your
hair.
room.
Can you smell that? Smells like jealousy in the air. Don't know who they're trying to scare. Looked at the man in the mirror, that's the only enemy that I fear. A zombie knows who to frighten. Just know I love the action, but I move in silence. And right now I'm just taking what's mine till Elizabeth returns the diamonds. One brother, time to hustle for the money, give a change to your mother. Change them sheets, you got stains on the cover. Better look sharp, like your face on the cover. Trying to be the boss of life gets tougher. I hope you're ready for the truth that you're gonna discover. Always gonna be a Judas at the Last Supper. Stay woke, it's a rocky road on the come up. The shots like Scorsese. More money, more problems, and more ladies. Every day somebody dies, still mothers give birth to more babies. The earth spins, the world gets more crazy. You gotta have a suit for the christening, a suit for the wedding, and a suit for the court case. Probably wear the same suit to the funeral. Trying to see the bigger picture, man, it's bigger than the portrait, bigger than me. No, you can't fight off your demons with vitamin C. Have to open your mind, use your vision and see. Keep your eyes on the prize so vigilantly. Love how you live, remember the world full of expensive shit. Can't forget the poor, cause you're friends with the rich. Stay true to the bone, I ain't never gonna switch. Yeah. One brother. Time to hustle for the money, give a change to your mother. Change them sheets, you got stains on the cover. Better look sharp, like your face on the cover. Who's that pressing on the buzzer? Better check the camera, you don't wanna get stuck up. You listen close, you can hear death around the corner. One wrong move and we're all gonna suffer.
Oh yeah, vibes. Thanks everybody. Fear and Loving. I'll be back next week, Tuesday, 7 p.m. Eastern, with Truth Now streaming in with me. Much love. Thank you for listening. Hit me up if you got any questions or any comments about anything I said today. See ya.